Ah, I'm already live. I'm good. I got that. I got that. Wow. So I've had the feeling where I've actually had a hot mic for the past like 25 minutes, but it's just been off or something like that. So I've had to watch to make sure I make no like potential things on comments on a bus that'll be brought back in 25 years to get me in a lot of trouble. Okay, 1 second. Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to be talking to you about Angular-CLI. So excited to see all of you here tonight. I don't know if any of you, so I happened to come across this tweet very recently, but I feel like it is a sentiment very well shared amongst a large portion of the JavaScript developer population, which, and despite all of the comments about JavaScript fatigue or JavaScript fatigue, or any of the other many turtles all the way down, I myself have had, so how many of you have felt this kind of feeling before? Okay, so I've tried, I mean, I've set up Webpack, I've set up Babel, I've tried setting up React manually, I've built my own like gulp pipelines, all of these things that require hours, if not days of learning, and then at least a week or two of setup and testing. And gratefully, most of my life is not about hackathons in the sense that I actually get to ship things regularly, but I really am consistently annoyed with the rigmarole and I think immense complexity of taking individual pieces of JavaScript or CSS and individual libraries and frameworks and NPM modules and all of these things, and having to wire all of these things together immensely complicatedly. So anyone remember, I'm throwing back here, this is from the 90s. Remember this GIF? No? Wow, okay. So this was like hamster dance time, and I feel like every time I'm building a JavaScript application from scratch, whether I'm doing that with Angular or just pure jQuery and CommonJS, every single time I am in this gigantic Rube Goldberg machine of complexity. And even though I'm confident and believe that my brain can handle the 19 different streams that go through gulp and then somehow end up with Webpack and then get tree shaken all correctly, it's something that I personally hate to spend my brain power on, whatever little of that I actually have. So what I'm going to talk about is Angular-CLI, which I consider Dramamine for my extremely motion-sick brain and programming muscles. And basically, it takes away all of the urge to vomit that you might have when trying to deal with all of these tools at the same time. So, but by the way, I mean, I know that this is sort of like a really big room. I don't mind if you ask me questions. There's also lots of space close here. I don't mind if you just like yell out questions or anything like that. It's not, I feel way more formal because I'm like on a podium, but I don't really feel that way. So Angular-CLI is a tool built by the Angular team. It is still in beta. There are some things it does not support that I will probably be glossing over later. It is a Swiss Army knife for how you can very quickly and easily set up and build Angular applications. Instead of having to wire up everything manually, or even having to necessarily even understand what Angular or Webpack behind the scenes is doing, you can very quickly get an application running. And that's what, for me, as someone who is, so my background is sort of originally in some Java things, then lots of JavaScript pre any framework, and then up through the backbone renaissance, let's say, and did a lot of Angular 1, and am still currently in the process of learning Angular 2, as I think everyone is, because there's quite a big surface area for Angular. Once you npm install ng, which is, Angular-CLI, it gives you this new executable called ng. It allows you to do things like init a new application, gives you everything out of the box. I'll show you a demo of that in a little bit. It allows you to serve that application so you don't have to create your own web server. It will automatically do that for you. It will make builds for development and production, so it will do all of the fancy, the things that you basically have to have some advanced PhD to understand, like tree shaking and all of the complicated minification that you might need to do. It will handle all of that for you, and you can delve in if you actually want to. I will say I've never wanted to, but it's only been like a couple months since this whole thing came out. It allows you to generate new components, allows you to generate new classes and enums and modules without having to manually create new files or manually fill in the typical boilerplate. It also, and this is one of the amazing things it does out of the box, is will run your tests for you with Karma and run your end-to-end test stuff with Protractor without having to do any work. You just type ng test and it will all just work, and I'll show you how that works in a second. So how many of you have worked with Rails before? Oh wow, okay, not that many people. So I've done a lot of Rails work. I'm not particularly a Rails developer, and what Rails allows you to do with extreme simplicity is all of these things. And out of the box, the time it takes for a new developer to build and deploy a new Angular application, although one with absolutely nothing interesting in it, is 30 seconds. And I will show how that works depending on how the Wi-Fi is in a second during my demo. Does anyone have any questions before I go on? Okay. So, can you see this? That's a little bit out of focus. Yeah, you can see that. That's fine. Okay, so I have now an executable called ng, and I'm going to create a new directory called Angular-CLI demo. And I can now run ng init, which will go and create all of these files. And I'm going to skip ahead cooking show style because I've already npm installed everything. And I can run. So from starting up my application, from initting my application and typing the command ngserve. Now what this is doing is it's running through all of the Webpack stuff that you would normally have to configure TypeScript correctly and to configure all of your particular application code correctly. And it spits out immediately something that you can then just go use. App works. You have an Angular application. This Angular application is bare bones. It has basically nothing in it. But I can show you. It has a single module called app. All of this is generated for you. This is the bootstrapping of a new application that you had to do no work to add. There is a single app component that has nothing really major in it. If I change this to, let's say, this will eventually it will realize that the file has changed, rebuild in Webpack, and automatically refresh the page, which I will admit I'm a little disappointed by because refreshing the page myself is like the best feeling that I really miss from the age of pre-hot reload development. My favorite keyboard shortcut in the world is Command R. I don't know why they've taken that away from us. And also, so this is not actually fully like injecting everything fancily. If you do happen to be using NGRX, as you will hear about in the next talk, there are thoughts about Angular CLI's mechanism to be able to hot inject code, but it doesn't want to force you down that path, so it doesn't make you do that necessarily. So out of the box, I have quite a few different features that I'm able to use. So once I can, so let's say, for example, I want to, So here I have this watcher going to every time I make the changes, it automatically compiles everything. I can then run ng test because there are automated tests that are already created for me that, let's actually run that. So this will actually open up a browser, and it will fail because I changed the particular copy that is in one of these tests. This says it expects hello AngularNYC AppWorks to equal AppWorks. And so it actually did run through all of my tests, and it keeps a new Chrome window sitting around in the background for you to keep running the tests as you are developing. So if I go back here and I change this back to the title that my unit test is expecting, this will rerun in the background and will tell me that all three are successful. I have all of this with no wiring up of anything. It automatically gave me the testing library. It automatically gave me all of the hooks to actually run this in the command line and to be able to spin up the browser that it all works with. You can take all of this generated things and run this on your whatever you want to, Selenium stack, similarly for the end-to-end tests. So Angular 2 is using Webpack underneath. So that's fairly recent, I think in the past month or so. It originally started off using the exact same tool chain as Ember CLI. A lot of this is somewhat from the code perspective, and also the ethos of Angular CLI have come from Ember CLI. It used to be using System.js and not Webpack, and now they have transitioned everything over to be using Webpack. It used to be using System.js and Broccoli, and I forget what other things. So right now, I have a fairly bare bones application. It has set everything up. So I have a app component HTML file, and all that. It just has this single H1 in it. And it has some comments for things I will do later. So let's say I want to actually bundle this for production. Or actually, let's say I just want to build this. So if I type ng build, the amount of things that come with absolutely no work is incredible. And if you're a Rails developer, you're sort of used to this, but I'm very not used to this. So here I just built the whole application. It was put into the dist directory. It has it has everything needed for deploying this in development mode. So it has all of the source maps and everything like that. And its entire bundle size is 2.54 megabytes. You see up there? I don't know if you can see up there. If you see right there, it's 2.54 megabytes for the main bundle. Now, again, out of the box, if I do ng build -- prod, so this will override all of my distribution files with the production versions, and this will take a little bit longer, but it is really cool to watch. What this does is it goes through the normal Webpack resolution of all of the dependencies, and then what it does is it goes through and drops, so it does the tree shaking algorithm and goes through every single function call and finds out which ones are not called. So it actually removes, for example, dropping unused function get type name for debugging, because that function is never called, so it is not needed. Right? And it actually, and when you write your own functions, it will also remove them if it doesn't happen to be used, which is pretty cool. And then it makes the correct assumptions around, like, if there are functions that have side effects, it can't correctly make the assumption it's droppable, so it will tell you. So here, the final size before was 2.54 megabytes. And here, it is 824, which is, I haven't done the percentages in my head, but it is a gigantic savings out of the box. And all of this works with all of your own code that you can create. Cool. I intended to actually read through this once and try to find all of those functions to see why, to understand why it can't remove everything, but I haven't quite done that yet. Yep. Yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. So the built file is, the ng build command will also give you a gzipped version of your bundle. Although I don't actually know why that is preferable to having your web server do it. I actually, maybe it's because some things I probably won't go into is that this can actually deploy directly to GitHub pages. There is a sort of plugin for it to go directly to GitHub pages, and maybe GitHub pages doesn't gzip for you. But yes, it does have I'll get to eventually. But there's a lot of features into in Angular CLI, and they're not even done yet. So, getting back to what you can do with this, let me go back to ngserve. Actually, so Angular comes out of Angular CLI allows you to create a style file, create styles in addition to the styles that Angular 2 provides for, because in Angular 2 components, you can actually provide style URLs for individual components. Here, this is the app, the larger level. Let me see if I can make this bigger. So here you'll see that in Angular 2 by itself, it allows you to provide individual styles for individual pieces. But if you wanted to write styles for the whole application, global styles, you can put that into AngularCLI.json, which is the Angular.cli.json is the configuration file for Angular CLI. And this is all by default. You don't necessarily have to change this. It gives you access to something called styles.css, which allows you to add any global styles like background red. And then it'll go through the normal building process, and eventually this will be red. Great. It's beautiful how these demos work, right? But let's say that you don't want to be doing this in CSS, because that's just so not what the cool kids do anymore. You could go into this. You could move styles to styles.scss. And then, for example, let's say I wanted to Bootstrap. Let's say I want to install Bootstrap, which I think I've already done. Great. So I've installed Bootstrap locally. I have switched my file from CSS into a Sass file. And I put in the actual path directly to Bootstrap, and out of the box. So when you change something in the actual configuration of Angular CLI, like CSS to Sass, you have to restart it. And there's a syntax error. Does it have to have a semicolon? Oops. Yep, thank you. There we go, valid. Okay, so this is with the Bootstrap file. I can go in and make sure that it is using, so I've made a button that uses some Angular, so it uses some of the Bootstrap classes right there. And I do have them, which is great. Okay, so let me see what else can I do. So another thing I could do is, for example, so I can generate a component, and I'm going to call it my button. I want to move this stuff into like what used to be a directive, but is now a component. So I can add that here by adding my button. So this will automatically generate for me a CSS file, an HTML file as a template for that, and a spec file that will automatically be wired up to run, which is amazing. Let's say I want to use, so instead of what is down here, I want to be able to use button text. So because I generated that using the Angular CLI. Once I generated that, it automatically got added to the imports of my application module. It also automatically got added to the declarations of my module. So this was all edited by the CLI itself. So when you create a new component or create a new class or create a new pipe or directive, it will automatically do all of this for you, and you don't have to put it in all the right places to wire it up, which is amazing. So the question was, what if you're importing a previously created one? Then you wouldn't use the generator to do it, and you would do it manually. It doesn't have some way to like import existing ones. But when you create one, it'll do that. So I created the MyButton component. So it created the MyButton component. I'm going to add to here public text string. So here I've passed the text value. This is the first issue of the demo. Yes, so I need this input. Yep. Thank you. Which is lowercase? Ah. Then I have to import input, right? I don't remember where that is. There we go. That worked. It was close. Made it through most of the demos without any issues. Thank you. So with, I appreciate it. I really do. I got most of the typing down by heart. So with, basically very, very little wiring at all, And basically no need to understand how the ng module sort of import system works. I am able to add a new component to my code. You can generate so much more than that. You can generate pipes, directives, classes, modules, enums. You can generate pretty much everything, and 90% of the wiring happens for you out of the box. Yeah. I think that it will actually not let you. I believe that it will warn you. Let me make sure. Yeah, it'll tell you. I don't know if you can see that. It'll tell you, are you sure you want to overwrite that? Does that make sense? A lot of that stuff is coming from the base, which I think, so this uses the Ember CLI generating thing, which I believe uses the Yeoman generating thing. I think there's a whole, there's many other libraries this uses to do a lot of the common work. I really like the fact that we don't have to build anything from scratch anymore. It's on NPM. So Angular CLI roughly gives you a pre-made folder, or not a folder structure. It gives you a pre-made application structure. You get a /src directory that you can do whatever you want in, but everything outside of that /src is very well defined. /spec and how the styles work, like I showed. So all of that is well defined. You could, so the question was, can you use Angular CLI just to generate and maintain your tests, but not your actual application? I'm confident that you could, but you would have to manually map between them. Cool, anything major I left out? No. So, okay, so another thing, and this might fail. You can also, so I showed earlier your unit tests, which is fairly straightforward to do even if you wanted to do it on your own. But this will also run the ng end-to-end tests for you, which will hopefully pass because I didn't change that much. Yep. So this actually spun up Protractor and Selenium for you and ran that against the locally in development served mode application, and we'll do all of this for you. So every time you generate a component, you get a spec. You can add manually your end-to-end tests, and it is very easy to do. And if you needed to get, you can configure this to spit out JUnit XML if you want to add this to Jenkins or whatever you happen to be using to aggregate everything together, if that makes sense. Cool. So I have shown you the extreme tip of the iceberg here. It is actually, the documentation for this goes on many, many pages. They're not even done. They are still working on adding features around being able to generate a route and being able to use the sort of mobile toolkit as part of this. Both of those will be added, but the expectation is that they'll be backwards compatible, so you can just upgrade your Angular CLI instead of having to redo any of your application. I'm a big proponent of using this sort of right now end to end, mainly because I think it takes away the huge amount of what the learning curve, basically. So there's a lot more that I haven't talked about. It does linting for you. It generates a lot more than I showed you the examples for, and it does it all completely fluently. And it integrates directly with GitHub Pages. So if you happen to be working on something that can be deployed to GitHub Pages, you just need a few lines of configuration, and there is a command directly to push to GitHub Pages on your behalf. What I really like about this, so it took me a while to find an image that kind of sort of worked with this. I really enjoy that it brings, for me, the learning curve of Angular from this extremely complicated hellscape of a cliff to something that is calm and gentle that I can actually just walk up. If any of you are feeling like Angular 2's learning curve is overwhelming, as I will admit I sometimes still do, I would really encourage you to use Angular CLI to start to learn more about the framework. It has helped me a lot without understanding anything, typos today aside. So I'm John K. Paul. You can feel free to npm install me if you actually want information about how to get in touch. I run a meetup group called NYC HTML5, and I'm always looking for speakers, so in case any of you would like to, please let me know. I also do sort of JavaScript training for people and teams, so get in touch if any of you are looking for something like that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.